Hello, my name is Annie Liu, and today I'll be discussing different tips and tricks in order to remember the muscles of the thigh that moves the knee in the anterior department.
So let's first go over the anterior portion of the thigh, okay? So the patella, which is right over here, I'm going to highlight it in the screen, should be facing us. So the quadriceps femoris, which is the set of muscles right here, and it's the set of muscles that's currently colored already. It's made out of four muscle groups, so only three is shown, but deep to the rectus femoris right here actually lies another muscle. So it's actually made out of four muscle groups. So going laterally to medially, we have the vastus lateralis in red, and then we have the rectus femoris, which is here in green. This is superior to the vastus intermedialis, which is right under this, so it's deep. And then finally, we have the vastus medialis, which is here in blue. One thing to remember is that the quadriceps femoris is kind of like the trunk of the tree. So it's kind of like this portion right here, okay? While the four muscle groups are like the roots. So that's this portion right here. And what I mean by this is that the quadriceps femoris all encompasses this four muscle groups like the trunk of the tree, and the four muscle groups make up the quadriceps femoris like the roots of the tree. All right, so now let's actually get started into giving tips on how to remember the anterior portion of the muscles of the thigh. So starting out with the quadriceps femoris, just broadly, we can remember the quadriceps femoris by its name. So the prefix of quad means four. And you can relate this to the four muscle groups that it encompasses. And femoris right here, well, you could kind of think of this like the femur, in which we know that the thigh has the huge femur bone. And we can get a hint about the placement of where the quadriceps femoris is. So continuing with this analogy, let's actually go over the different tips on remembering the roots of the trunk. So let's look at some names of the other muscle groups, and a great tip in order to be successful in anatomy class, this class and the next, is to use the names in order to get any clues or hints. So let's first start off with the vastus lateralis, so the one in red right here. All right, so when I see the word vastus lateralis, the first thing that pops out to me is the lateralis part, right here. So when I look at lateralis, I think about lateral. And as we have learned in the previous weeks, being lateral means to move farther away from the midline. So vastus lateralis, you can deduct that this muscle group is the farthest away from the midline. And so right here, this is the midline. I'll do this in black. So this right here is a midline, okay? And as you can see, the vastus lateralis is the farthest muscle group in the quadriceps femoris away from the midline. So for the next one, we actually have the vastus intermedialis, and this is actually deep to the rectus femoris. Let me get a picture up right here. So as you can see, the vastus intermedialis is deep to the rectus femoris, and so therefore the rectus femoris is superior. So by the name vastus intermedius, if you look at the second word, intermedius, what I think of immediately, and again, this is just for me, I think about intermediate or in between. So the vastus intermedius is actually in between the vastus lateralis, and that is right over here in the red, and the vastus medialis, and that is going to be in the blue, right over here. So again, in between or intermediate is the way I would remember the vastus intermedius. All right. So what is superior to the vastus intermedius that we just mentioned is the rectus femoris, and this is going to be the one in the darker green right here. And again, this is superior to the vastus intermedius. And for this one, just like the quadriceps femoris, there is a femoris in the rectus femoris. And again, this part kind of gives you a clue on where it lies. So remember, the femur is a thigh bone, and you could kind of think, okay, rectus femoris must be somewhere in the thigh or the upper leg region. So, one way to remember that the rectus femoris covers and is superior to the vastus intermedius is to look at the first letters of each of the words. So, we have R and F in rectus femoris, and we have V and I in vastus intermedius. Now, if you look at it just based on the alphabet, R comes before V and F comes before I. So I kind of use this just to remember that the rectus femoris comes before the vastus intermedius, if that makes sense. So it's going to be the rectus femoris on top, and then under it is going to be the vastus intermedius. And finally, we have the vastus medialis. All right, so when you see vastus medialis, remember the first thing to do is to look at the name to see if you can get any clues. And when I look at this, the first thing that pops out is this word right here, medialis. And for me, my mind jumps immediately to medial. And as we have learned in the past, something that is medial is closest to the midline. And remember that the midline is located right here, right? So this is a midline. So if you're medial, you are closest to the midline. If you're lateral, you are farther away from the midline. So vastus medialis, if you look at right here, the vastus medialis is the one in this blue, and it's the closest muscle to the midline in the quadriceps femoris.
Thank you so much for watching. Happy studying!